Hey everyone, this is Pico Entertainment and we are back again, and here now we have another video for you, and this will be just an overall discussion on the MCU and in particular the venture into television with the Disney Plus shows and how I think they've done overall in terms of their quality and their reception amongst critics and fans. Now of course the three shows in question are Wandavision, which was released first, of course, the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, which was the second release, and most recently Loki. All three, of course, were available on the Disney Plus platform. Now, just to warn you now, there will be spoilers potentially throughout this video, so if you haven't yet caught up with all the episodes of the three series, I advise you to go away, catch up on all of them, and then come back to this overall discussion. And you can also check out more extensive reviews of each individual show within the channel. Now, when Marvel announced their Phase 4 slate, and the television shows, it was very much of a big deal because this was the first time we'd see a continued synergy between the movies and the television shows. Yes, we did have Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which ran for I think close to 7 seasons overall, which focused of course on Agent Coulson and the S.H.I.E.L.D. organisation. We had Agent Carter, which was very much what happened before the S.H.I.E.L.D., focusing on Peggy Carter, who we all know from the Captain America movies, played with some appeal and allure by Hayley Atwell, of course. And we also had the Netflix shows Daredevil, Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, Iron Fist and The Punisher. But for mostly, the movies really kept a distance in terms of their overall association with the shows. The shows would make references constantly to the movies, but the movies were very hesitant in returning the same favour overall. So many fans felt that whilst the shows took place in the same universe as the Marvel movies, there wasn't quite the same synergy that what we got with the most recent Disney Plus shows. But with all three of the Disney Plus shows, this was really a chance to focus on characters that were liked but perhaps didn't warrant enough their own live action movies. Now the MCU could expand even more on its stories and use the shows to get many new audiences invested in their movies who hadn't necessarily seen them. That was the main attraction. All three shows had interesting concepts with actors already well established playing the characters already through the multiple movies. WandaVision itself indicated a venture into different realms, promising elements of the spiritual and supernatural. Many were super hyped over links to the multiverse that we know is planned by the MCU, many hinting that through adapting the famous House of M comics book storyline, we would see the emergence of mutants and the X-Men within the MCU. Falcon and Winter Soldier promised a much more grounded storyline, seeding very much more of a buddy cop dynamic between Sam and Bucky Barnes, whilst continuing the legacy of the S.H.I.E.L.D. handed over by Captain America from Avengers Endgame. Loki perhaps offered the most interesting series because for the first time we were following the story with the villain in the lead role, promising very much more of a crazy, wacky, time-travelling romp with Loki causing all sorts of chaos within different time periods. Now in terms of the three shows overall, I think there were very mixed results with quite a lot of room for improvement overall in terms of the execution, in terms of the storyline, in terms of the performances from the cast and the characterization. All actors performed, I think, very well throughout the series. Elizabeth Olsen in particular was phenomenal as Wanda, and we saw her very much develop her acting skills throughout the character arc that we saw Wanda go for, and she's probably the most justified Emmy nomination, as well as supported by Paul Bettany, who was very good as well as Vision. Catherine Kahn as well, I thought performed very well as the main antagonist Agatha. We saw some good character arc and development from Bucky Barnes facing up to his past sins as the Winter Soldier. Sam Wilson also got put to the forefront as he became the newly anointed Captain America. And as always, Marvel continued to embrace the costume look and aesthetic from the comics. We finally got a Wanda in much more of a comic accurate look in terms of the Scarlet Witch. Marvel of course went very close as well with the Falcon Captain America suit from the comics. The visualization of the US agent as well was very true to the source material, and it even went extreme with seeing all of the multiple Lokis, again tying very much to what was hinted at and showed through the comic book storylines. However, each show had multiple issues, and I think the biggest one was the terms of the execution of the stories. Not quite following through on the stories fully. I think all three shows lack a certain momentum and couldn't fully justify the amount of episodes or indeed the runtime of each installment. WandaVision in particular just took too long working into its narrative. It meandered far too much time, devoting too many episodes into the sitcom realities. it turned out to be the longest episodes out of all 3 shows, consisting of 9 episodes, which are around about 20 minutes or so. And I've truly feel that each episode could have been condensed down, and this should have been just 6 episodes like the other 2 shows. Loki itself really couldn't establish any major compelling narrative throughout this series, and by the time it reached its climax, the whole show really felt less important, settling much more for setting up future events within the MCU rather than focus on the individual character of Loki himself. For all 3 shows, the antagonists were very weak and underwritten. Loki itself really didn't have a main villain. Carly from the Falcon and the Winter Soldier was a very weak and indecisive antagonist, providing less conviction overall in terms of secretive group and what they were trying to achieve. And even Agatha, who performed very well by Catherine Kahn, really didn't become the main antagonist until the second to last episode. So once again, unfortunately, like many of the Marvel Phase 1 movies, the Disney Plus shows really suffered a lot from underwritten antagonists, which I think takes away a lot of the urgency and jeopardy of each of the shows. Now, of course, the shows had very high budget because it's Marvel, of course, and whilst the finales of Wandavision and Falcon and the Winter Soldier were very explosive and spectacular, they just felt a bit rushed overall and really felt out of place in keeping with the various episodes that we saw prior to the season finale. Loki, as I mentioned in my overall review, was the least eventful of the entire shows and really left you felt shortchanged and underwhelmed as to the overall concept and potential that that show could have reached. So in terms of all 3 shows, I get the feeling that going ahead, Marvel simply has to do better. It has to do better, particularly with its storytelling and particularly how it handles the narrative going on from episode to episode. But it just has to learn much more to really present these shows as standalone installments that anybody can get into, regarding of whether you've watched all the films or not. Now, as we all know, there's always a certain level of hype and speculation about each of the Marvel shows online. Many of the huge Marvel fan base speculate multiple times which comic book storylines will be linked and how these shows will set up future events within the MCU. But one thing Marvel does have to be careful is how it constantly trolls the audience and wants to subvert expectations. The biggest example of this was, of course, the appearance of Quicksilver within WandaVision. Of course, this was the Evan Peters version from the Fox movies, and this is what got a lot of people hyped because they felt this is indeed indicate the crossing over of the Fox X-Men movies, and will we eventually see the looks of Magneto and Wolverine played by Ian McKellen and Hugh Jackman within these eventual shows. Now, of course, Marvel really trolled the audience. It ended up being just a nonsensical character. I think his name was Ralph Boner. They think that's kind of funny, and I think the joke really felt kind of flat. Now, audiences may tolerate that behaviour for now, but if Marvel continues to really kind of tease their audiences, bigger things, and then just letting them down with a joke, then that could really have long-lasting effects in terms of the overall perception of the Disney show. So I think Marvel just need to be a bit careful of how they kind of want to manipulate the audience and tease them for future things to come within the universe. Now, some may argue that this was the first foray into television for the studio, and they wouldn't be perfect home runs. They're kind of just finding their feet and adjusting themselves to telling these stories much more on a television format, which is a valid argument. But you have to remember that Marvel has worked with these characters for multiple years now, having a firm grip on their characterization and who they are in terms of their personalities, and it's managed to develop their stories and arcs over the course of 10 years, with many people deeming the cinematic universe itself more like a long-running television series. So I think they've got a firm grip enough on these characters to be able to tell substantial and coherent and compelling storylines within the television format. Now, many have brought up again the issue of social agendas and woke politics and how they've plagued these shows overall. Now, when viewing this, I wouldn't say that there were woke agendas in every single episode of the series, but it was apparent quite clearly the messaging in certain aspects of each of the shows. Now, the biggest example of this, of course, was Falcon and Winter Soldier, the finale episode, when Falcon emerges as the new Captain America and he makes his elongated speech towards all of the politicians and the government, considering everybody, and it was a very much of an overindulgent speech, I would say. And Marvel, again, just has to be careful about making their shows much more about superhero adventures and comic book stories rather than the social messaging, because as we all know, that's one thing that trigger fans a lot overall, and that can quickly turn a lot of admiration about your content into a lot of hate and antagonism. And as I mentioned before, they really need to make these stories more essential viewing from a standalone point of view. I don't think that these shows should just be there just to exist as add-ons or set up for future pieces within the movies. They should be a connection, of course, within the overall universe, but they should be able to function on their own as individual series so you can still enjoy them without necessarily knowing all about the movies. Now, there's definitely potential to be better. They have the resources, the budget, the good actors, and the world building all from the movies. They just need to work a lot more on the storytelling aspects. Now, in terms of ranking overall, I would say the best of the shows was probably the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. That was probably the most consistent in terms of what it was trying to do, its narrative beats, its action. I would say Wandavision was the second, because despite the fact it didn't really get going until the 4th episode, it did remain with enough engrossing elements to keep you at least compelled to watch to the final episode. Loki for me was the weakest by far, very much the most disappointing because of the huge concept and potential that it had, but it really didn't follow through. And as I mentioned in my series review of that show, that it really could have been condensed down to 3 episodes because there just wasn't enough in terms of the supporting characters and the subplots and narratives that they were trying to tell throughout that particular story. So overall, as I mentioned before at the start of this video, whilst there were certainly good aspects of each individual shows, there's still a lot of potential, and I think overall Marvel must do better in terms of their storytelling and their utilisation of the concepts for these shows. So how will they do in the future of the Disney Plus streaming platform of which these shows are originating on? So if we look at what's to come in the future, the next show is Hawkeye with Jeremy Renner's Click Barton returning for his role, and this will introduce Hailee Steinfeld as Kate Bishop, who we will assume will be the next Hawkeye going ahead future for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Shortly after that, we have Ms. Marvel, which follows the adventures of Kamala Khan with the powers of elasticity, and that she uses Carol Danvers, Captain Marvel, as an inspirational figure. We later on go on to She-Hulk, which for me, I'm the most excited about because I'm really interested to see how they would visualize She-Hulk in terms of her powers and her size overall. Now, from the suggestions that we've got, Marvel have hinted that this will very much be of an offbeat lawyer comedy, very much in the same style of what we got with Ally McBeal, if you remember, from Calista Flockhart way back from the early 90s. And there's been various rumours that Charlie Cox will be reprising his role as Daredevil from the Netflix show as well. So that will be, for me, the most interesting aspect of the shows. I'll be very much interested to see how they execute and how much action do they make it, or how much do they make it much more of a comedy. And of course, the key aspects will be on how well rendered She-Hulk is as a creation. The other show, of course, is Moon Knight, which involves a superhero having multiple personality disorders. We all know that Oscar Isaac has been confirmed in the lead role. So again, much more depth in terms of character, personalities and character driven drama. Again, how much will Marvel hinge on that, and how much will they fuse much more on the abilities and superpowers of Moon Knight? We'll wait to see. Other shows, of course, we have Ironheart, which will introduce Riri Williams, who from the comics, of course, was the de facto replacement of Tony Stark. Armor Wars later on will focus on Don Cheadle's role as Rhodey, and Secret Invasion will see the return of Nick Fury and the potential emergence of the Skrulls becoming much more of an evil force within planet Earth as well. So I still see a lot of potential within these shows. I still think there's enough hype and excitement, and again, this will indeed depend on how well they weave those stories within the movies and create that synergy that I mentioned at the start of the video. But just to wrap up this debate overall, I just think so far, in terms of the 3 shows that we've seen overall, Marvel just must do better in terms of the storytelling and the plot synopsis overall, and the utilising of these concepts, if indeed this is going to be a long and prosperous venture in terms of the Disney Plus shows, and Disney Plus is going to continue to contend with both Netflix and Amazon and eventually surpass them overall. So those are my thoughts and feelings on the overall quality of the 3 Disney Plus shows, WandaVision, The Falcon and Winter Soldier and Loki. Let me know what you think in the comments below. How well do you think these 3 shows have performed on a Disney Plus platform overall? Do you think they've exceeded expectations? Do you think they've performed below expectations and there are many areas that they need to improve on? Give me your thoughts and opinions on how much more that they could improve on going ahead future with their projects coming up within the next couple of months and years as well. So those are my thoughts. Please let me know what you think in the comments below. Please also hit and like those subscription and notification buttons so I can provide you with more high quality content like this in the future. But that's it for now. Take care of yourselves, stay safe distances, and I will see you very, very soon.